Thanks so much for joining this open learning session on rural and remote funding to deliver social impact. My name is Cheryl Reddy, and it's a real pleasure on behalf of Social Enterprise Australia to introduce this webinar, which is convened by Jennifer Jones from Sefa Partnerships in collaboration with a bunch of wonderful participants from a community of practice that they have collectively brought to life over the past year. And we're really excited to learn from your experiences as peer experts and peer learners in the rural and remote social impact space. So thank you in advance, Rachel, Andrea, Claire, Rebel, Sarah, Trevor, Fiona, and Jennifer for your time and care in sharing your insights with us today. By way of background, we host these webinars and support a range of peer-to-peer learning communities as part of the Social Enterprise Development Initiative, which is funded by the Federal Department of Social Services. Our intention is to create spaces for change makers across the social enterprise community to share knowledge and share experiences that help strengthen connection and collective care across the sector. Before I hand over to Jennifer and this incredible lineup of speakers, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and careholders of the unceded lands from which we're all joining today. As a migrant settler to this country, I'm privileged to live as a guest on the lands of the Wadi Wadi people of the Dharawal language group. And that's a photo behind me of the beautiful lands that I live, work, and play on. I pay my respects to elders past and present who've cared for country and community for thousands of years, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today or viewing this recording later. I appreciate and am thankful that your presence holds over 65,000 years of systems thinking and relational care for people, place, and planet. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Jones, and I'm joining you today from the beautiful unceded lands of the Gadi people. I'd like to take this moment to pay my respect to the elders of this nation and acknowledge the continuous care and connection to the country that hosts us and nourishes us and inspires our listening and learning together today. It has been my great pleasure over the past year to host this learning community, exploring the challenges and opportunities to change the way that we fund impact in rural and remote Australia. I do this work on behalf of Sefa Partnerships in collaboration with our sister organization, Sefa. And if you don't know us, we provide flexible finance to impact-led organizations to help them access the resources they need to grow, promoting a more inclusive and equitable future. I can see some of our collaborators on the call today, and I really thank you for joining us and for being partners in our learning journey. I'm also really grateful for the support of the Australian Government Social Enterprise Development Initiative for funding this work, and to Social Enterprise Australia for their support delivering the program. Last year, I went to the Impact Investment Summit, and I was asking impact investors how much of your investments are targeted towards rural, regional, and remote communities. And I got a lot of blank looks and not a lot of concrete answers. And one man asked me, "Are you talking about agriculture?" When I started reading, I noticed two things. The first was a deficit narrative around rural Australia, the daycare deserts, the workforce challenges. You know the drill. And the second was the ease with which the solution was often, we'll just build the capacity of the rural folks. I work from an office in the heart of Sydney, so I know I'm not speaking from lived experience here, but I really don't think that's the end of the story. And while there's a lot of great people doing wonderful work, building the skills and capacity of rural and remote social entrepreneurs, and I really hope we continue to fund those programs, this community was designed to explore other opportunities for change within the funding system. I started off earlier this year with stakeholder interviews to listen and hear from people who are already doing this work. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank everyone who gave their time and shared their experience with me. I think we have someone on the call today from the Australian Centre for Rural Entrepreneurship. And I also want to thank wonderful intermediaries in our sector like SECNA, SECTAS, WASEC, and the Foundation for Regional and Rural Renewal for the time, the expertise, and the great work in this space. I had the great pleasure of hiring a regional artist to work with me on this project, and using an artist was pushing us to be creative in our conversation and to explore other ways of communicating other than just verbally on Zoom. It's been really great watching her bring to life complex feelings and concepts in visual illustration. We're going to be launching the illustrated guide to the rural funding landscape soon, so you'll get to see all of Rachel's work in that publication. And I just learned working with her about using visual tools to spark conversation, to form connections, and to strengthen our relationship. And I'm super excited to explore how we can bring art and finance together in the future and where that might take us. Our learning community brought together two distinct groups. So we had six impact leaders from across Australia working in various sectors. And we also have a group of 8 funders who come to us from traditional finance institutions, from philanthropy, and from community foundation. We met separately, and then we came together in conversation around 3 key themes, talking about how we're experiencing funding and the opportunities for change. I am so delighted to be joined today, by 6 of the members of our learning community, 5 of the impact leaders and 1 funders. I think I was the most surprised in our conversations about how many funders in Australia are excited about rural investment, who are curious about working differently, and who are creative in their ways of thinking. I'll be sharing some of their stories with you in the illustrated guide, but I was just inspired by the ways that all of us as a group heard and moved from the frustration and the pain that we were feeling towards fruition, healing, and opportunities for change. I'll be introducing each of our speakers briefly, but you can see on the screen our lineup for today. And please do forgive me if I interrupt or cut anyone off. I know we're all super passionate about the work we're sharing today, but also respectful of our schedules. It's my great pleasure to hand things over to the members of our learning community to share with you what they've learned. And first off the rank is the wonderful Rachel Biskey, talented illustrator and graphic designer from Wagga Wagga. Take it away, Rachel.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Jen. Good afternoon to everybody on the webinar. My name is Rach Biskey and I'm a regional artist and graphic designer from Wiradjuri country in New South Wales. My practices focuses on amplifying the voices of regional Australians through illustration, as Jen alluded to, and I tell stories visually to help people connect to their community and to their identity. I was invited onto the Rural Impact Program because of my lived experience as a regional practitioner who knows what it's like when funding appears through open tender or when you're dreaming up ideas in response to grants that might materialise on the horizon one day. That waiting and that hoping your vision and their objectives might somehow align. Jennifer Jones brought me in to translate the challenges articulated by people in this program into illustrations, iteratively and honestly, and as you'll learn very soon, very much out of my comfort zone. The imperfect illustrations I created were then discussed by the cohort in each session. Yes, this is just one example of the very imperfect illustration that was discussed, but these illustrations became bridges connecting rural, remote, and metro landscapes, 3 worlds that often cross but are seldom understood. Working imperfectly meant I had to let go of ego completely. These were not my illustrations, they were tools. Sometimes rough, like my axe skills chopping wood in the wintertime, and sometimes they were right to the point, like when I'm fencing a paddock and I drive the star picket straight into the ground. When we put something visual in front of people, something imperfect, something human, the cohort were able to participate equally. We found the formal language fell away, status quo softened, and people started having real conversations about what they actually think and feel. The illustration of the hearts on the ground in this illustration, for example, they're from the person carrying the backpack. This one really spoke to me because we all dream big. There's a lot of love to give, but sometimes there's a trade-off in what you're allowed to deliver, based on KPIs or budget or relationships you have or don't have with people on the team. So through this process, I realised my own challenges aren't unique. regional funding applicants face similar struggles. There's that balancing act of applying wholeheartedly, while knowing parts of your vision will become remnants along the way, like those hearts on the ground. The burnout when you succeed and the program consumes you, that sense of good is defined by metrics and economies of scale that don't fit our context. I'll finish up soon, but just wanted to know that you to know that we do experience these challenges in isolation, but it's only until we have the space and time for knowledge exchange we realise, oh, you feel this too. This isn't just me. So this program taught me something crucial about trust. I had to own my narrative and I had to trust Jen's process, even when it felt really deeply uncomfortable, even when the work wasn't polished, as you can see, and even when I didn't know where we were going. But being perfectly imperfect, showing the rough sketches, the iterations, the works in progress, created something more meaningful than any polished final product would have, because it prioritized humans as central to the conversation, not outputs or deliverables. And both Jen and I agreed the art is the tool and the conversation is the work. That shift in thinking changed absolutely everything. It meant that we weren't measuring success by how beautiful the illustrations were, but by what dialogue it opened. Working on these illustrations validated my lived experience, frustration, the gatekeeping, the feeling that the system wasn't designed for people like me, and everyone felt versions of this. There needs to be a better way to communicate and to build relationships across the rural, remote, and metro landscape to make funding more human-centred. This program showed me it is possible. The illustrations were bridges, and the conversations they carried showed me we can build something better when we trust the messy, uncomfortable, human process of getting there. I'll hand it back over to you now, Jen.
Thanks so much, Rachel, and thanks for getting messy with us. It's been such a pleasure. I'd now like to hand over to the fabulous Trevor Meldrum, who joins us from Cape York in Queensland. Over to you, Trevor.
Yeah, I'm Trevor. I run an Indigenous not-for-profit for Cape York. We work with the Indigenous Advancement Strategy. We were formed to try and stop our people suffering on the ground. Our background, I think we can fit Tasmania into Cape York 3 times. But the first thing people talk about when they hear Cape York is it is pristine, when it is not. We have been dealing with over 150 years of human impact. And because the majority of our people are Indigenous, we have suffered with that impact for these times. So we have tried to make it positive by working on country, and we work with young people, old people, and everybody in between to get the work done. And we can do a lot with very, very little. We do a lot of work on country because that's where our people are bonded. And it doesn't matter whether you're Indigenous or not Indigenous people. Our country up here is so special that it affects you one way or another. With a lot of that comes a shared responsibility of looking after our country, and we try to blend our Indigenous knowledge with our modern scientific stuff. We've worked with scientists who have their funny little ways of doing things, same as we do as cultural people. We also are attuned to our ancestors. Because our ancestors have instructed us over the years, we must share everything. So what Rachel was saying was before, whether it's imperfect, whether it's perfect or no good at all, we like to share our good, the bad, and the ugly. The other point is that we would like to encourage some of our people or some of these philanthropics or whoever that has an interest in Cape York to come up and have a look at what we do and what we can achieve with Sweet Bugger All. So that's about where we are. There's a story in 2019, I seen a dugong in a dugong nursery that had not been there for 25 years because of this pond apple you're seeing on the screen now. We got rid of it, and the seagrass beds that are needed for the turtles and the dugong have regenerated. To get there, mighty proud of what we achieved, and it also helps our people work in amongst country, and it helps us also make a living, look after our country, and reobtain or regather our pride up for our country. Because as most of us, we are from here, and once Cape York calls you, you can't get out of it. You've got to stay here. So that's pretty much us at all. But we're just encouraging people to join us on a journey, and hopefully we can keep establish the partnerships that we already have, and we're thankful of whatever resources that we have. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Trevor. I think your participation enriched our conversation so much, and the message really about having people on the ground, routine presence, visits that last longer than just a quick fly in, fly out, and being able to see and experience the wonderful work that you do. It speaks so much louder than words on a page. So if anyone can get up to Cape York, strongly recommend. I would love to come swimming with the dugongs with you.
We can always introduce you to our crocodiles. No drama at all.
I might pass on that one. Thank you. It's my great pleasure to hand over to Claire Wood. Claire joins us from Western Australia, and I think what struck me remarkably about her is the vast distances she travels as part of her everyday job. So Claire, over to you. Tell us what you've learned.
Hi, thanks, Jen. So I'm Claire. Today I'm coming from Wadandi Budja down in Margaret River in the southwest, but I'm the Director of Enterprise Partnerships, and we support First Nations women in entrepreneurship and using leadership to kind of change their communities and lead and create thriving places across the Kimberley. So we work with a whole variety of language groups right across the Kimberley. I really enjoyed meeting this group, and I have to say Jen's facilitation was excellent. And I was thinking about what it was about Jen's facilitation that made me enjoy the conversation so much. And it was that sense of curiosity. And I think I was like, wouldn't that be wonderful if everyone was this curious about our work? People that fund us. And it kind of got me thinking about how people who live in their regions, live in their places, live in their towns are like the experts on that context. And how do you shift that expertise and that power dynamic between funders and people seeking funding? And, how do you make it more collaborative language so people sort of share the risk of funding together? This is a photos I just took last week, and it's on Queenie country, and the community that you can see there in the photo is Columbaroo, where Queenie and Warrnambool people live. And so occasionally when I fly out of these places, I get to kind of, this bird's eye view, and I think this is the same for many regional places. People may fly in and fly out, and I look down upon the streets that you can see there, and I just think of how rich it is of stories and of place and of culture and of change makers, and how vast the disconnect is between, First Nations women's aspirations and the capital funding system, and how are they translated to other places. And it kind of struck me in the opening here, you can see this river is starting to fill up. There was some rains and a pressure system come over, but that, quite often it could just be dry and desolate, and then other times it's in complete flood. And again, I think that's the experience of running a social change organisation, of like just hanging on through dry periods and then experiencing a flood and then not having the growth to do that properly. I was thinking about the question around what's the opportunities for change in this funding space. And again, I kind of just imagine, what if First Nations women were just backed and trusted and funded over time for their long-term mission of social change versus the reality of short-term projects? And what if within those projects, travel and cost and distance and time were separate to the actual delivery of those projects? To fly from Kununurra out to this place, Kununurra is the most closest regional town in the very top of the Kimberley. It's a 1,000 return ticket, basically. And so, to then think, okay, how do I get that First Nations woman in front of someone in Sydney? That might be $1,000 to get out, an overnight stay, because there's no way that Virgin or Qantas are going to run on time. How do you manage all of those challenges? and the vast spend it takes to get people in front of networks in order to make, their aspirations possible. And then I had this other picture zooming out of just how awesome it was to meet the great people on this call. And you multiply that by all of the amazing change makers, and it's just absurd. The system is absurd. I think people are incredible with their outcomes on such leanness and, often on the edge of burnout, or this idea of hero entrepreneurship is really not helpful. And so again, I was imagining, what if you had conversations with funders that got to back you in those times and understand the context of floods and dry seasons and capacity and might be stronger. And then I was like, can we just dismantle that word capacity building and have that it's more like barrier removing? People that live in rural and remote areas have like the most incredible creative capacity building skills ever, right? With all the hardships they might face and increasing hardships with climate risks and challenges. So I feel like I could rant. I've got no idea of the time. But I've really enjoyed being part of this group. It's been helpful to kind of zoom out and not feel alone in this space and kind of dream about what could be created if the people seeking funding and the people providing funding kind of came together in a more collaborative, relationship-based way rather than transactional. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Claire. That was
Thank you for having me.
perfect. And thank you for bringing those photos and showing us a little taste of what your context looks like. I think Western Australia often gets left off of conversation, and it was so wonderful to have your insights with us.
Thank you.
We're going to move now over to Queensland, and I'm so delighted to introduce you to Sarah, who has the joy of organizing Queensland's Music Festival and Music Trails, which helps bring people and to explore regional, remote, and rural Queensland. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Jennifer. I wanted to start by saying I feel very, very strongly with what Claire said. I feel like having the group together and just feeling like you're not alone in sharing your thoughts and your feelings about funding struggles was just such an amazing experience. And I really, really enjoyed being a part of it. My name is Sarah Killerley, and I work for the Queensland Music Festival. We started off originally as a festival in Meanjin, Brisbane, and over the last 4 years, we've created the Queensland Music Trails, where we go into regional and remote areas. We collaborate with local communities, First Nations groups. We have a very strong local buy policy and EOIs for everything that we do in terms of the festival. But the idea is that we bring incredible musical performances to areas that wouldn't be able to experience them otherwise, and inject all of this amazing support into the local economy. So we're bringing tourists who stay longer, who help support local businesses. We're supporting local artists who get a platform to be on a stage with people like Xavier Rudd. And we've got these amazing events that happen throughout the outback. We've got 3 major trails. We've got the Outback Trail, which culminates in Mount Isa with Outback Sounds. We've got my personal favorite is Between the Tides, which is happening in Airlie Beach next year, where there is a section of beach, and as the tide pulls out, a stage is constructed and this incredible performance happens with a welcome to country from the amazing First Nations peoples. We have these stellar, incredible artists, local and international and national. And then as the tide comes back in, we leave absolutely nothing behind. So it's such an incredible experience that if you haven't done it, I would really recommend it, because you feel so connected to country and to the people who've performed, and the audience come away with a whole new perspective on the land that they've maybe walked on a million times. So as you can see, I'm very passionate about my job. But maybe, Jen, now is a good time to show just a little video of what we do so you can see.
Remember when we almost died? When I ran right through that red light. Remember when we drove all night? I love that dog, really thought that he was gone that time. I don't know what I want from this. I don't know
love QMF because they drive regional dispersal, support regional communities and help to increase length of stay. Partnering with QMF is partnering with the regions of Queensland.
We love being a part of this music festival that's right across Queensland, and that's the best thing about it. It shows people from one end of the state the wonderful things that we know already. How good is Queensland?
The Queensland Music Trail is a special initiative that brings economic and cultural benefits to the community and our region.
So from that video, it looks like we are incredibly successful and have all the money in the world. The problem that we face is so much of it relies on philanthropy and grants, and I've applied for about 66 grants in the last 7 months, and only one of them was multi-year. And to achieve the impact and go back to these communities and help support them economically, you can't just be there like we discussed in the meeting, like a seagull where you fly in and you fly out. We want to be there for months at a time, helping support, helping collaborate and building that skill so it stays in those regions. But to do that, we need grants and sponsorships that actually sustain us so we can achieve that amazing impact. So that was incredible to share with the group and hopefully come up with some solutions for funders to think of better ways to support in a more long-term fashion, because all of us felt exactly the same. You don't just want a year of funding, you want 10 years of funding. But that's me. Thanks, Jen. Oh, I suppose I can talk about this as well. This is basically from the video as well. It's just we've partnered with 18 councils, 28 communities statewide, 170,000 attendees have seen our events, generating 26 million in economic impact. We win loads of awards for the work that we do, but with every single other not-for-profit that we spoke about in our working group, we have exactly the same struggles. The box office is only about 1/5 of the money that we need to keep this happening. And going into regional and remote areas, we've obviously got staging infrastructure, paying for these really high-level artists, collaborating with all these amazing local communities. We have events in local schools called the Outback Exchange, where Spinifex College in Mount Isa, they get to see Taylor Moss and all these amazing artists, and they hold questions and answers and learn about employment pathways for young artists. We have a healthy aging collaboration project, which is an aged care facility and a young dance house of 10-year-olds, and they collaborate together and they make a dance and then they perform it on the stage at Mount Isa for Outback Sounds. We've also got our incredible First Nations songwriting programs as well. There's an area called Jabija Angui, where William Barton, who is a traditional owner from Mount Isa, is going to collaborate and create some original works. So we try as many ways as we can to create creativity within the areas we go. We just need the support to keep doing it.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. And I think what you brought to the conversation too is that incredible impact measurement. I think we started out, Sefa started out thinking that one of the topics we might discuss is how we can measure impact more effectively. Realize that actually you guys have all the skills you need to be measuring and communicating your impact. Really that tightrope of not wanting to appear too polished and amazing, needing to be like deserving of money, and walking that tightrope was really evident in the conversations you shared. So thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
I would now like to introduce, many of you might already know Rebel Black. She is one of the sector champions with SECNA, and she's been really championing rural women across New South Wales for so long. And it's my great pleasure to introduce all of you to the wonderful Rebel Black.
Thank you, Jen, and it's lovely to be here with you all. Great to see so many people on the call and interested in the learning experience that this incredible cohort of people have had together. I'm on the land of the Yuwalarai people in Lightning Ridge in Western New South Wales. I've lived here for 25 years, and for more than the last decade, I've been building the Rural Woman Cooperative, firstly as a business, and then secondly as a community-led exit. So I worked with a group of colleagues to develop, to build a cooperative that then acquired the business that I had been building for about 7 years prior to that. So really passionate about ownership and stewardship, and really having, how do we build community wealth? And so when you live in a remote community like Lightning Ridge, where it's essentially a 10-hour drive to anywhere of significance, the opportunities for connection and networking are limited and costly. And so, as I think some of my other peers have said today, having said that, I've always said yes to as many of those things as possible. And there were two things that really struck me about this opportunity. One was that I would be in the room with both peers and colleagues in the social enterprise sector, and two, that I would be in the room at the same time with funders and people that are on the other side of this double-sided marketplace that we perceive that we play in anyway. The second was that we were offered to be paid. And even though it was a nominal amount, it was still the first time ever in 25 years of community advocacy that offer had ever been made. And very often, in fact, almost 100% of the time in all of the community advocacy work that I do, I am the only person at the table unpaid because I am a volunteer advocate. I am the volunteer chairperson of the Rural Woman Cooperative. I am the volunteer vice chairperson of the Lightning Ridge Opal Fields Reserve Trust. I don't get paid for these roles. In fact, most of the time I'm paying for the privilege. So that to me signaled an incredible shift, like a tidal seismic shift in the way that consultation was at least being framed up. So I was super curious to see how that played out. And I wanted to echo Claire's words that Jen was an outstanding facilitator, and the facilitation methodology and also her manner has been exceptional. And I want to thank you for that, Jen, because I really think you brought the best out of everybody that was at the table and enabled safe and real, transparent and authentic conversations to happen, because change does not happen in the absence of that. So we can't move the needle on anything that we're not willing to be truthful about. And we can't be truthful about these things unless we're in safe containers to have those difficult and uncomfortable conversations. The second thing that really was brilliant or about being here was kind of reinforcing that change cannot happen by gaslighting individuals, and that we need to take both a bottom-up and a top-down approach to change. I've been building a kind of concept around change needing to be around 4 S's. We need to help change the self. That seems to be where we're very narrowly focused a lot, that the individual must change. But we also need to address systemic and structural issues that are presenting themselves in the marketplace, in the sector. And we also need to address societal barriers. And so I think we really need to be looking, and that to me was what was great about this community of practice, was that we were able to extend ourselves into all 4 of those areas and have conversations around what does it mean to be a founder, and what does it mean to be a social entrepreneur, and the structural, systemic and societal barriers that we face. And what does it mean to be a funder in that same space? You know, the challenges and complexities. I loved hearing about the challenges from funders, because when I'm in a room with a funder, they're not telling me their problems. They're just, they're just listening to me pitch and thinking, how do I solve their problem? So I think that was a really beautiful relational opportunity to kind of, I guess, get more real in a way where there were no expectations and no power dynamics, because that is the other thing that we face, is that, you know, at the intersection where I work of gender and geography, the power imbalance is enormous. It's unaddressed, it's unnamed, and it is huge. And so I think to be able to speak to that is really important. And the final thing that I saw recently in Malaysia on a trip that I took with thanks to SECNA and the social enterprises I'm part of, was that we need a minister. This has to be top down as well. It's fine for all of us to want to make change and to get into rooms together and collaborate. But we need a policy agenda being driven through ministerial portfolios. So Minister for Community Wealth Building, Minister for Social Entrepreneurship, Minister for something that is around the change that we're really trying to see. So thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in the entire experience. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Rebel. And Rebel is actually one of my stakeholder interviews getting started. And so she very generously, I think, called our attention to the vast amounts of unpaid labor that support social impact across regional, remote, and rural Australia. I think that a lot of that unpaid labor is very gendered. It's often women. And that is what is driving so much of the incredible impact that we are seeing across our country, thanks to women like yourself for your leadership. I'm so glad that you were able to participate, Rebel. Thank you. I have the incredible privilege of introducing you now to Andrea Hogg, and her job is also building the capacity of rural leaders across Australia. And she is based in Canberra, but she works all across this incredible nation. So over to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks everybody for joining in today. I'm Andrea Hogg. I live on Ngunnawal Ngambri country in the ACT. And as Jen has just mentioned, it's my absolute privilege to get to be able to work for an organisation that develops leadership for people who live and work, play, have great times, and are also challenged in rural, regional and remote Australia. We're an organisation, we're into our 34th year, going to our 34th year of operation. And that sounds amazing, and that probably makes it sound like we've just had, endless security of funding to be able to do that. But I think anybody who has worked here, there have been many, many periods where, we weren't quite sure that we were going to make it into the 34th year. Because it's not always secure, as we all know. Not wanting to repeat everything that's already been said by the other amazing people that have been part of the group. Similarly, I have found this to be such an incredible opportunity to have really open, transparent conversations where we've been able to challenge each other and also to connect within this sector. And it's almost strange that we don't do this more often. But I think one of the reasons that we don't do it is that frequently in this sector, you are pitted as a competitor rather than a collaborator. And where we are all really, really, competitively trying to secure grants. We were joined by a couple of people from time to time in this community of practice who actually had some data sets on the amount of grant applications that not-for-profits submit in a calendar year. And then there was actually that had been calculated in terms of all of our time, all of the monetary value, and actually then what amount of money was delivered or able to be secured by the people who got the money in the end. It was just really skewed in terms of how we were all sort of competitively working for this amount of money. And those were the kinds of conversations that I think we unearthed. We already knew some things, but we didn't know other things, and we were naming them. And I think once you name something and bring it into the public conscious, then you have to do something about it, right? You can't pretend that it's not there because you know about that. So it was a great opportunity, and also we did get to hear from funding entities, and like Rebel, I really appreciated that opportunity because we can all hold assumptions about why we're not getting the money and they've got the power over us and so on. But it was really useful, I think, and informative. And I suspect for a lot of the people that we were able to speak to, they very genuinely are looking for alternative mechanisms as well. I suspect in the busyness and in the legacy that a lot of us inherit as either fund seekers or fund makers or grant makers, we need to take that time out to do these sorts of things, to be experimental. And that probably leads me to some of the things that I think is further opportunities for the sector and for this community of practice is money for experimentation for the social enterprise sector or the not-for-profit sector is not very forthcoming. you generally have to prove your runs on the board. You have to indicate in a grant proposal that you're absolutely 100% that you can deliver on a certain set of outcomes and that you will be able to measure them. And there's very limited money and appetite for people to come with you on an experimental ride. And there's a real need for operational and untied funding. And I think we would all say that. As an organisation that brings together people in our leadership work from all over Australia, and we are really, really consciously attempting to be equitable and always have been equitable around people who come from rural, regional, remote. And if you consider the map of Australia, the distances involved, and Claire mentioned as well earlier, the distances involved in transiting somebody, from remote Australia is exhaustive, just so much money. Any money that can help offset those operational costs would be really, really great. And I've actually got a really good news story. During the course of being part of this community of practice, our organisation we were really fortunate enough, after many years of having some conversations with a philanthropic foundation, where we were really just talking openly about the possibilities of aligning and working together. They approached us. They wrote the proposal for us. So they have offered us a proposal. And it's just, in our world, that's unique. We've never had that before, but we know it's possible and we'd love to see more of that. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you so much for sharing that story with us, Andrea. I also have never heard of a funder writing the proposal, and I love it, and I'm super keen to try it out next year and see how it goes. So thank you. You did also share this beautiful picture with me. I'll just throw it up so that everyone can see the wide open possibilities for leadership development across Australia.
Yeah.
And noting, the challenges of delivering a solid evidence-based program that needs to continually be delivered over time. Congratulations on 34 years. That is outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are coming near the end of our conversations, and it's my great pleasure to introduce you to one of the many participants who is in our group of funders. Fiona Maxwell is the CEO of the John Villiers Trust, and we are so delighted to have you join us today. Fiona, over to you.
Hi, Jen, and many thanks for having me. I'll have to give you a new headshot. I've grown a bit more hair since then. I'm coming from the Turrbal Niagara lands in Meanjin, Brisbane, and delighted to be here. So the John Villiers Trust is a public ancillary fund, and we specifically fund children and families in regional and remote Queensland. You have to get out of Brisbane before we'll fund you, and our focus is very much on community-led, place-based, but also prevention and early intervention work. We're invitation only, and that's really with a view that we don't want not-for-profits to be writing lots of applications that aren't going anywhere. We will have a coffee with anyone, or have a chat with anyone, and then it's really about working with the people that are the right fit for, from an application point of view. And we also have a focus on elevating country voices. I grew up in North Queensland, in Mount Isa and Winton and Cairns, but it's sort of staggering in Brisbane how little conversation or awareness there is of regional Australia. And in fact, I was in a national conversation and someone was talking about a Melbourne-based organisation that was complaining about having to travel to Warrnambool. And Warrnambool's like 3 hours from Melbourne, whereas in Queensland you could travel 3 hours and not get very far, although your mobile phone probably won't work. So a couple of kind of questions that this whole process sort of threw out. How do we create more intent in our philanthropy rather than simply giving to good causes? And how do we think about the role of philanthropy beyond giving away money? The Queensland philanthropic sector is immensely connected, and we have a number of strong collaborations. So one of the things is the Queensland Kids Funders Alliance. So those of us who are funding that in the child and family space, we work very collaboratively. And then also emerging is the Queensland Place Funders Network, which is exciting, with both some Queensland funders, but also a number of national funders who are at that table. I was new in the role when this whole journey started, and so it's been a really great learning process for me to meet such a diverse mix of funders and social enterprises working regionally and nationally. And I think a number of our calls, we had people literally calling in from caravans where they were kind of road tripping all around the countryside. So it's been a good test of the internet capacity of various places, among other things. But working in social enterprises regionally is so different. The role in the community, the interface with local business, the challenge of connectivity, all those things that people have raised, or even just the cost of getting to somewhere or coming to participate in a professional development experience. And I think Trevor's internet dropped in and out half the time, so that was a good example of that reality. I really valued working the process with the artists. My background is in visual arts, so that was just lovely, Rachel, to sort of have your interpretations of our journey, but also the ability for us to have had a discussion, have it illustrated, and then kind of come back to kind of go, well, what were we trying to say there? And does that illustrate what we were trying to achieve? Was that a positive sentiment or a challenging sentiment? And how can that be sort of visually represented? So that was a really healthy practice, and I think a type of collaboration, Rachel and Jen, that you could very well do again. To pick up some of what others have spoken on, it became a strong kind of trusted and respectful conversations around the power dynamic that ultimately exists between funders and grant seekers. And having spent nearly all my career as a grant seeker, it is an immense privilege to be in this position of giving money. And I absolutely kind of recognise we had a really hearty discussion around, yes, this very major national funder had been very proudly received 3,000 applications for 30 grants and thought that was a good thing. And across all of us in the group, we were appalled that was not something to be proud of. That was 10,000 not-for-profit hours that hadn't translated. But for what it meant for me is, as an invitation-only funder, I would never want to appear as a closed shop or having closed doors. So it's how do we maintain an open conversation whilst also not getting people to write grant applications that they're never going to go anywhere. And so we've had some good follow-up conversations with folks since then. But I'm really excited. We've just had a recent grant round of a new strategy, and one of the proposals we've supported is multi-year untied funds to a regionally working organisation in Central West Queensland. So that's something really delightful because they have strong community relationships, and when there's a crisis or an issue in that community, they need to be able to respond. But what I heard recently, which has really lifted the benchmark, I think someone said, couldn't we have 10-year funding? I heard about a beautiful family foundation in Victoria, in a regional area of Victoria, who just made 3 10-year grants to organisations that they're working with that are $1 million plus each. So, that's an extraordinary kind of relationship and legacy. It's been a fantastic opportunity and a great connection, and I hope that others can join in these kinds of forums moving forward, and we can continue the conversations. So thanks, Jen.
Thanks so much, Fiona, and thank you for your insights and the learning. I will also say, in some of those conversations, I tended towards the grant seeker side of things myself, and really appreciated funders calling me up on that too. We do have a tendency to slip into the frustration and the kind of demonizing. This community was wonderful in connecting us and bringing us together. That wraps up our kind of formal part of the conversation. Alice, were there any questions that you wanted to throw to us, or should we just go live to the audience? So if anyone wants to come off mute and shout a question at our panel, we would love to hear from you. Or you can stick it in chat. I can see one from Andrew Riley. For program and service providers, what type of evidence of expected and actual results from your work do you think funders and impact investors should expect to see?
I can start if you like. The evidence piece is such a tricky thing, and the measurement of impact, particularly of sort of long-term social programs, is a really often quite challenging thing to measure. So it's both the data in terms of participation and outcomes and impact, like some of the stuff that Sarah put up about QMF, but also the stories, the case studies, the individual, here's so-and-so, they participated in this program and here's something that happened in their life that came out of it. I think on the question specifically around impact investors and how do you measure or compare that, that's a whole other piece, because how do you measure social housing compared to carbon farming, compared to solar projects? That's really challenging, and there are global entities that are trying to do that work, like the Global Impact Investing Network, and Jen, you might have others. So yes, when someone figures out how to compare that, let me know.
I do think as well, to lead on from Fiona, the grants that I think are the most aligned are where they've got the big blank boxes and they go, what sort of impact can you achieve and what are your ways of showing that? So because, as Fee was saying, like every single application and grant is different, so you do have to have different ways of measuring. But yeah, the social lasting impact of what you've left in the community is very hard to gauge. The best way is maybe, asking for testimonials and feedback, and then going back the next year and seeing how things have changed. But again, it's the long game, right?
I think I'm just reading Andrew's question around the evidence, like what is the evidence? It is actually crucial that organizations are better at collecting that evidence and are resourced and supported to collect that evidence. I think especially when people are grant writing or building programs, they're not necessarily embedding evaluation and measurement and evidence gathering as part of their core business. They're just thinking, let's get the job, we want to get the job done, we want to get the impact. But the actual building of the evidence is quite a costly, exercise to do it properly, to gather those case studies, to do the longitudinal research. But I think it's a really great question that we all need to be embedding it as best practice, a kind of core business, that we're constantly building evidence banks that are both qualitative and quantitative as well.
Thank you. I noticed as well, we had an interesting discussion around, we didn't have any government folks participate in our conversations. We did have the invitation out to some departments, particularly in New South Wales. It was really challenging for people to be able to represent government and participate in a group like this. And I think the big challenge I heard from our social impact leaders was that government funding changes because of policy change and not because of evidence. And we had really great examples of programs with really solid evidence who had invested time and money in that collection of evidence, and that had no impact at all on whether funding continued or not. And the emotional toll of that is quite devastating over time as well. So just recognizing that. I did see that Andrea Chamberlain sort of had a question about understanding better operational funding options. Andrea, did you want to ask something or jump in and say something on that note?
Yeah, happy to ask. So I guess my question is around, there's a lot of work goes into writing grants or applications and gathering information, gathering support, doing all those sorts of research things. I've started to notice that a lot of, maybe I'm looking in the wrong place, grants don't actually value the work before you put the application in. It's all about what you're going to do after. And I wondered if I was missing something, or if that's just the way it is and that's part of being in this space.
I noticed recently, I don't know if others saw it, but Minderoo Foundation partnered with Regional Arts Australia and they did an expression of interest. So a double process. The expression of interest was pretty comprehensive, even though it was an EOI, but they were paying $1,000 for those who were moved through the EOI into an application. There was a $1,000 contribution to the applicant for the next phase. And I thought I hadn't seen that before, because you're right, Andrea, even to build those grants, requires a huge amount of work, especially for letters of support and all sorts of things. I think that's a natural part of process of building a great project anyway. You shouldn't avoid doing that. But there is no necessary recognition of that in the process. But I did see a shift, and I think it's upon us all to amplify where we're seeing good practice, good change practice happening, and tell everybody about it.
Sarah, I saw your face light up too. Did you want to jump in?
I just absolutely love the fact that they're finally recognizing that there are 2 rounds and that, yes, both of them, an EOI and the full application, take exactly the same amount of work. So that's lovely what you said, Rebel, that someone's finally acknowledged that, and they're willing to support people through that next phase. So yeah, that just made me really happy.
We did have a discussion in our group about how we could better resource collaboration, noting that some of the greatest proposals that get out there involve a lot of work from communities that are connecting and figuring out how to do things more efficiently and work together. And it takes not just time and money, but also skills. And we looked at some examples. Foundation for Regional and Rural Renewal has a program. There's some great inspiration out there. There are just few at the moment. So hopefully we can grow those moving forward. I saw that Paul Deverell has a question. If you want to come off mute, Paul, and ask.
Thank you, Paul, for your inputs today. It's really good to hear about Minderoo, because this is something I've been talking about, and I've actually had a conversation with Jen about the whole costs up front, and unsuccessful applications, I believe, should get a small amount of money in return for the work that goes into it. And it's also interesting to hear from Andrea on the same issue of the cost of putting together an application. So I guess my kind of question/comment is around the number of charities that are out there, the number of funders, the amount of applications being put to funders, and how, from my perspective, I think the sector needs to learn how to collaborate more and to work in partnership with other charities and not feel so threatened by working with a charity that's similar to the one that you represent. I appreciate that comes with some big challenges, but I think we need to start thinking about that seriously and how we can do it so we are sharing costs and reducing down the pressure on funders and maximizing outcomes. So yeah, just curious on some thoughts or ideas on how to do that, because I know it's a big piece of work, and but I do think it's something we need to start thinking about.
Claire.
Yeah, I guess in response to that, it's somewhat connected to the how do you fund operations? And I think there were some language changes that I saw in a Minderoo post. I think I screenshotted it to look back, but it was kind of saying that some of that money goes into the potential to collaborate and to develop and to meet with partners. And in the Kimberley, we're really fortunate where a change maker, Natasha Short, who runs Magada Makers, has kind of fostered a really collaborative ecosystem between a lot of really small social enterprises. And so we have a great sense of collaboration. And I just often think, well, what would be possible if we were actually funded for that time and it wasn't all about love and passion, right? Because that only gets you so far. And so I think it kind of loops back to if there was more flexible, untied, multi-year funding, then the collaboration for impact you would see would be much greater.
And I love, there's great things happening because of great people who have great skills that they have built. But how could we resource it so we're not relying on that individual and putting all the responsibility and burden on them, but resourcing everyone to be gaining those skills and participating, moving from competition to collaboration. I think Nina had a question.
Jen, I think Nina's question is, what advice would you give to individuals who wish to start doing great things in their local communities?
Just start doing the things, have the conversation with the people that are going to do it with you, and don't feel like you've got to be the only person. You're probably not the only person thinking about the things. Just start, don't wait for permission.
I think there's some great forums that a lot of people regionally are talking about. Social impact in the regions was a really great conference that was in northern New South Wales this year and will be in Stanthorpe in Queensland next year. Change Fest has just happened in WA. so for people wanting to sort of start out and maybe understand some different methodologies, some different ways of working in communities, if you can get to those things, they have a really strong regional focus. And I think Change Fest will be in Cairns next year, so they tend to move around the country.
The other thing is, if you're very, very new to this kind of area, volunteer for an organization that you really like and help that way so that you start learning, the basics. And then if you want to branch out and do something on your own, at least you know how it kind of operates. But in the meantime, you're still doing some good while you're finding your feet.
All great advice. I would just add as well, looking for your sector intermediaries where you are. So there's state and territory coordination groups for social enterprise. There's also some charity groups that coordinate, and finding some people to inspire, connect, and support that work is a really great start. Well, I would just like to take this moment to thank everyone who's participated in the call today and in the funding conversation. It has been messy and uncomfortable and absolutely beautiful and flourishing to be sharing and experiencing this wonderful wild ride with all of you. We will be making a concrete output in the months to come and releasing that illustrated guide to the funding landscape. So please, follow us on LinkedIn, check out the website. We'll send some things out to you. But I might take this moment to hand back over to Cheryl, who will see us out today.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you so much for facilitating such a creative, deeply connective community of practice, where participants clearly felt safe and brave to share the realities, their dreams, perspectives, and pressures faced by, leaders, change makers, and funders in the rural and remote space. And there's so many takeaways from that. The space and time for knowledge exchange, using art as a tool to spark honest conversation. Trevor spoke about the shared responsibility of looking after country. Claire, I loved your approach to switching from capability building to barrier removing. Sarah, you spoke about the power of music to connect rural and remote areas. Rebel, the opportunities for change activation at the levels of self, system, structures, and societal barriers, and that we can't move the needle on anything that we're not prepared to be truthful about. Andrea, you talked about, once you name something, you have to do something about it. And wouldn't it be great if we took more time to be experimental and to fund that? And Fiona, I loved what you said about how do we elevate rural and remote voices? How do we acknowledge the power dynamics between grant seekers and grant providers? And we definitely welcome with enthusiasm multi-year untied funds to regional, remote and rural organisations. We welcome that trust in strong community relationships and strong community expertise. I think all of you have shared so much with us today. We've learned so much from having the privilege at Social Enterprise Australia to steward and to support the emergence of these learning communities. So mountains of gratitude to all of you, Rachel, Andrea, Claire, Rebel, Sarah, Trevor, Fiona and Jennifer, for being so generous in sharing your experiences and for showing us what trust-based care and collaboration looks and feels like. Thank you also to everyone who took the time to join us online today. Huge thanks also to the team at the Department of Social Services who are supporting the development of these learning communities with funding as part of the Social Enterprise Development Initiative. And thank you to the Social Enterprise Australia crew behind the scenes that make these communities happen. We invite all of you to check out Understory for our upcoming open learning sessions, including our last one for 2025, which focuses on human rights in social enterprise in the lead up to World Human Rights Day. We hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.